Countess Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the EARTHDAWN Roleplaying game system. Well, where we last left off, we were diving into combat. Let's talk about a little bit more defense, and then the wounds you take as a character. So for defense, we want to talk about shields today. So, there are characters that are allowed to use a shield. When you use a shield, it adds to your defenses, your ability to defend yourself. The drawback of a shield is that you have to use up a hand in order to wield said shield. So a restriction is when you're using a shield, you may only use a one-handed weapon in association with this. So, because again, one of your arms is already taking out this shield. Now the nitty-gritty of the rules of this shield are basically that it adds to your physical defense or mystic defense when you're in combat. And the thing about this is you must actually use it. You can't be carrying it around. You can't have it slung on your back. You just can't have it like on your arm. You have to actually be using it in your arm, ready to block an attack. Now, if someone should blindside you, you do not get the bonus that you would grant from your shield against your defense versus that opponent which is blindsiding you, and only versus that opponent there. If a opponent is using the going inside a shield option, they will also negate the defense bonus you're getting from your shield by basically knocking it out of the way. Now some shields, especially magic ones, will give a bonus to spell defense. It is important to note that much like when you're wielding your shield in order to gain the defense bonus, you must be wielding the shield in order to get the spell defense bonus. So I need it on my arm, I don't need it on my back, I need it right where I can put it front and center. The advantage of this magic shield, though, is that if someone uses the going inside the shield combat option to negate your shield, it doesn't end the spell defense bonus. You still have to have it ready to be wielded and in your arm and prepared, but as long as it's still here on my arm, I don't have to worry about losing that spell defense bonus, even if someone knocked it out of the way. Now let's begin to talk about wounds, because guess what? Over the course of an adventuring career, a hero should expect to, of course, take damage, to take wounds, to be injured. A hero will use a recovery test in order to rectify this. The results of the recovery test are used to basically reduce damage. You subtract those results from the total damage that a character has taken in order to effectively heal them up. If you take no damage, you don't need to recover. It's important also to note that a recovery test is based upon your toughness step, and this is for most creatures and characters, though there can be exceptions mentioned under those specific characters and under those specific creatures. It is also important to note that most things have a limited number of recovery tests over the course of a day. This will be based on their toughness score. Some talents, some spells can actually grant additional recovery tests to a character, but these recovery tests must be used within a short period of time, because all recovery tests go under the same rules of you use them or you lose them. Most of the time, for your recovery tests per day, that means you have to use them in the course of the day. You can't save them up. It's especially true in this case where talents and spells are giving you them over a much shorter period of time. Now, it is a very important thing to note that at the end of a long night's rest, when you've rested an entire night, you have to make a recovery test. This means that if you have only one recovery test available, you have to use it then at the end of the night's rest. This is forcing you to only use it then. If you should have few enough recovery tests that you get one every other day, well then at the beginning of your second morning, after your second night, that's when you would make the recovery test in order to recover. If you should have extra recovery tests beyond one, those extras, you have the opportunity to use them at different points in the course of the day. Though there are some restrictions as to when you can still use them, it's just that now I have the opportunity to recover more than once a day. It must be an hour in between uses of recovery tests, and before the recovery test is made, you must have been not having any strenuous physical activity or damage dealt to you in that hour leading up to when you're using it. So effectively, if I wish to use a recovery test, I have to begin relaxing, not doing anything strenuous, not getting into combat, not getting myself injured, and after an hour of this sort of resting, I can make a recovery test. This again, if I have those extra ones. If I want to continue resting, I could make more, but again, I would have to wait an hour each time at least, and an hour in between recovery tests, period. Though, it is very important to note there are 2 exceptions to this. The first exception, talents or spells that might give you an additional recovery test. This would be an exception to this rule, and the other one is if you're unconscious. Unconsciousness changes this rule. So, should I have taken enough damage to render myself unconscious, I can make recovery tests to get myself back up. The basic way of doing it is after a minute of being unconscious, I am allowed to make a recovery test. If I succeed at getting my damage below my unconscious threshold, I'm up, I'm awake. If I fail, I'm still unconscious and I have to wait an hour before I can attempt to recover again, should I have additional recovery tests that I can use. The exception to this even is if you can get aid or a spell. If another character should give you aid or a spell, this can allow you to make a recovery test right away, as soon as you get this aid, regardless if you've waited a minute in between there, so it means that minute doesn't have to go by. And should you recover significant damage, once again you wake up. If you don't recover that significant damage, you must once again, though this time, you wait an hour after this current test. So it does speed it up a little bit. The other thing is, if you get additional aid and spells, it can possibly give you more recovery tests to recover even faster yet again. It's just that if you should only get the aid once, you get that test then and there. After that, well, you either have to get more aid or you wait an hour. Now, there are 2 things I want to note because they are parts of wounds, but we're not going to dive into details about them at all. Poison and disease. Poison and disease are unique things that don't act like normal damage would be dealt to you. When we talk about poison and disease, we have to look to the Game Master's Guide. The Game Master's Guide will give you full details about these, so it's important for your GM to know about these. You as a player should be at least familiar with them, but you're probably not going to have to worry about them as much because you're only going to be affected by them, not usually wielding them the same way. But that's it for today. I dove more into combat in EARTHDAWN, first talking about another part of defense, using a shield. Being ready to block someone coming in, which you have to have it on your arm, ready to use, ready to block, and there are some rules about it, and you could have the shield negated. It can happen, but you can also have it right front and center there and protecting yourself. I then began to dive into the wounds you can take. I started, of course, with the recovery tests and how you can effectively recover from the damage that is dealt to you. You roll something based on your toughness step. Your toughness also both gives you and limits the number of recovery tests you can make, and you are required to spend 1 per day at a certain point in day. Meaning, unless you have those extras, you have to wait until you've rested for the night to use your recovery test. If you got extras, well, we went over the rules for those too. Then I also talked about the exception to any of this, which is being unconscious, which works completely differently. I then moved on, of course, to talking about disease and poison. Just briefly, they're in the Game Master's Guide. You can look them up there. In the next episode, we dive into wounds, and then we'll begin to talk about combat options. Because we've talked a little about the existence of combat options, it's time for us to learn what a combat option is. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you for the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link description below. There's great rewards there. It helps to grow and improve the channel. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.